Hey, folks, this is Bruce Hutchin, host of Hutchin Hunting. And today it's an honor and privilege to have a good friend and the pastor of my church, Mr. Steve Holt, Pastor Steve Holt, Dr. Steve Holt, that pastors the Road Church here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And the interesting thing about Steve, and we'll get into this more during the show, but Steve didn't start hunting big game until 1998, where he was almost 40 years old. That's quite an accomplishment and something that typically doesn't happen in the outdoors. Steve, welcome to my show.
Hey, great to be with you, Bruce.
It's going to be a good one. So let's just go to 1998 and tell the folks how the heck you became an elk hunter.
Well, I planted a church. It was called Mountain Springs Church here in Colorado Springs. And we had been going about 40 years. And this young man came up to me and asked if I'd ever done any hunting. And I said, yes. I said, when I was younger, on my grandfather's ranch, I hunted rabbits and squirrels and hunted quail with a dog. But I had not been hunting in over 20 years because of so much worldwide travel that I had done. I'd been a missionary in Japan for 10 years on top of that. So I didn't even know what an elk was. So I didn't even know what he was talking about. I knew about deer, but even back in those days, Bruce, that was just small game. That was it. So I had to educate myself. I had to dig in. I had to look it up. This is before the internet. Or before I was using the internet. So I had to go to the library and get a couple of books on elk hunting because I didn't know what it was. And I remember I needed to get a rifle if I was going to go hunting with them. I had to go through hunter safety. I didn't know anything about the regulations. So it was kind of baptism by fire in understanding and learning all these things. And I can't speak about other states, but in Colorado, it's pretty complicated. The system for hunting and when you can hunt and the codes and hunter safety, all those things that are necessary is somewhat complicated. But I dove in, I got excited about it, and I've never looked back since. And it's just been a great, great, wonderful experience.
So you had somebody come up to you and say, hey, Steve, let's talk about elk hunting. But then, as you just described, there's a huge ramp up just to get licensed. And how did you handle what it takes to actually go into elk camp? I want to hear about that.
Well, the way this worked out at first was we had these cabins. This guy who invited me had these hunting cabins that he rented from a person in Ohio, little town of Ohio in Colorado. And so it really wasn't that hard because he already had these cabins. So I just followed him. I actually drove up with him because I didn't even have a vehicle that could have gone through the rugged terrain of the mountains. And he had a 73 Ford Bronco, and it was pretty cool. And so, yeah, we started hunting. And the biggest thing for me was just getting over the fear of shooting a high powered rifle. So I got a 7mm mag that I bought used from a doctor, and it wouldn't shoot straight, Bruce. I mean, I couldn't get a grouping any closer than 7 inches from each other every time I shot.
Oh,
But the
no.
guy who invited me, his name was Torin. He was a gunsmith, so he started reloading for me. So he did the loading, and then I could finally shoot straight. And I used that gun for 4 years. I think I killed one deer and one elk in that first 4 years. But if I didn't have his hand loaded rounds, it was way off. So it would not shoot factory loaded rounds straight. But if he loaded them, then it was fine. So it wasn't just learning the regs and learning just how to hunt. It was also how to learn how to shoot straight. And that was getting my rounds hand loaded by him, but I didn't have any money. I was a church planter, so all my clothing was from Goodwill or from Army surplus stores. And we hunted in that first 4 years. I bet we were in 20 below weather 4 or 5 times. And it was always fourth season, which I don't know why I signed up for that, but I was just following what he said. So it's the coldest rifle season you could have in Colorado. And I'm up there in one of the coldest parts of the state at some of the highest elevations in the state. So again, it was just baptism by fire
Oh my
into
goodness.
elk hunting. But I still liked it. I thought it was pretty fun. And even though I only shot one deer and one elk in the first 4 years, I was kind of hooked on it. I thought it was something I could keep learning.
That's pretty amazing to think you would put yourself through that torture, because all my listeners who are elk hunters, you don't find elk in a park like, down the street. It's 8, 10,000 feet, 2 or 3 feet of snow, wind, cold, and it's miserable. I mean, it really is.
It really is.
And you have to be a dedicated person to say, hey, I'm going to enjoy this because I'm in a situation that I chose to be in.
I think truth be told, I had a growing family. That time we had 4, and we ended up having 7 kids. And on a pastor's salary at that time, the idea of enjoying going on a hunt and then killing, 160, 170 pounds of meat sounded very financially feasible. So, like I said, I hadn't spent hardly any money on anything. I had Goodwill and Army surplus clothing on. I had a used rifle that didn't shoot straight. And I had some friends that showed me where to hunt. So I just thought, okay, sounds pretty fun. And if I could come away with some meat for the year for my family, that would be great.
And it would be great. Did the guy who invited you teach you how to process the elk and the deer?
No, he never processed his own meat. So the first deer and the first elk, I took it to a butcher. And that's all I knew. That's all he knew. But I would say the biggest benefit to Torin was the invitation to come, a place to go. He had the Jeep to drive, and he helped me sight in the rifle. So he hand loaded my rounds, and he taught me how to sight in the rifle, and he knew where to set me up to hunt, and I kind of grew from there,
Yeah.
It was fun. I even though it was cold and it was kind of, I guess you could say it was sort of miserable. I didn't see it that way at all. To me, it was adventure, adventure, adventure. I loved the challenge of being a man out in the elements. I never was in the military. Always loved the outdoors. Always loved fishing. Always loved small game hunting when I was a kid. So it was almost like a resurrection of my childhood. And I was kind of living out some of those desires that I had never experienced when I was a kid. Because I used to live, I literally lived for getting Field and Stream magazine every month. I couldn't wait for that thing to come. I would devour all the articles in about 2 hours. And I'm out there on the ranch, and I grab my little single barrel youth model Sears 20 gauge shotgun. And then I just go walking through the 200 acres that we had. And that 200 acres was contiguous with another 200 acres. So I really had 400 acres. And there are about 3 coveys of quail on it, lots of rabbits, lots of squirrels. So I never knew what I was going to come back with. But I just loved that. I couldn't wait for hunting season in South Carolina and to just jump in and do it.
Yeah. So the seeds of hunting, especially big game, were planted long time ago when you're a kid. But and here's the thing I want to take away on the point of that for my listeners is if you know somebody that has an interest, help them, mentor them to become a hunter because hunting, unfortunately, hunting licenses, fewer and fewer are getting bought. We saw a blip during COVID because people said, "Hey, I'm going to go out and get some meat. I'm going to go out and hunt." And so we've seen somewhat of a resurgence. But to all the listeners out there, Steve is a perfect example of somebody taking him by the hand, providing the way to do it, and getting him into the outdoors, which both Steve and I have a special relationship with God in the outdoors because some of my best hunts across North America have been when the hunt's over, I'm just sitting there looking at God's handiwork and going, all you can do is say thank you.
Absolutely. And it goes without saying that as a busy pastor, the opportunity to know that every year you're going to go out camping with some guys, because I transitioned after that. So about 2002, I decided to try a new area, and it was in the flat tops of Colorado, and found a great spot. And the first time I was there, shot my elk on opening day, and then everybody in the camp got their elk on opening day. So except for one guy, and that's the reason we stayed. And so he was dead set on getting a bull, and so he kept going out every day by himself to hunt. So that was really my first time, Bruce, not in that cabin setting. I'm in an outfitter's tent. I got a fire. I'm in the woods, and I've got 4 days to kill because I wanted my friend Vance to get something. So he was going out. So we weren't going to leave unless Vance got something until the last day. So even though on Saturday we shot ours, we had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So 4 days, 3 days full of nothing to do except read my Bible, pray, and hang out with my son and another guy that was with us. And that's when I discovered that was like, that's not what I got into it for. I got into it to get meat for my family. That's the bottom line. But then I discovered this spiritual experience of just quiet. I never have quiet. With 7 kids at home, never happens. And then a growing congregation, never happens. So I found that this was like a retreat for me. And that's when hunting big game, elk hunting, deer hunting went to another level. That's when it was different. Now it was as much a kind of mystical experience with God every time I went into the woods, becoming more and more important than even whether I came back with something or not. So yeah, so by 2002, 2003, that's when it took on a whole new meaning, because we did, from that point, I've always hunted from an outfitter's tent way up high in the wilderness. So those first 4 years were not that way. They were more, I don't know, civilized hunting. We took off from the cabins and went up and came back. Now I'm in the wilderness. And so for the last 22 years, that's the way I've hunted. And so we had to drive these, and we still do this, unreal hard roads, really some gnarly switchbacks way up where hardly anybody goes. And then we set up camp. We do everything. We cut our wood, we split our wood, we set up the tents and everything. And it's kind of grown into a little community. We call it the Roosevelt Elk Camp. And it's about 12 guys. And now it's fathers and sons. Back in the day, it was just us, but now it's fathers, and now their sons are coming up. So pretty cool. We do that every year. But it became a spiritual experience, still is a spiritual experience. I expect it. Matter of fact, it's because I've gotten older. I hunt pretty hard on opening day. And then I'm by the fire the majority of the rest of the time, whether I've gotten something or not, because I enjoy that time by the fire as much as the hunting part. To me, the whole thing's the same. It's all part of the experience of the adventure of it. Same with fly fishing. Fly fishing's that way. It's like, if you think that just catching fish is what fly fishing's about, then man, you're missing a ton, because fly fishing is walking out on the stream. It's tying the flies. It's picking what you're gonna fish with. It's the sunshine. It's the rain sometimes. Sometimes it's the snow. I mean, you gotta love it all, or you're not gonna do it. If you have to just be catching, or you just have to be shooting, then you're missing 90% of the adventure.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up fly fishing because, as you know, I love the fly fish. And the biggest thing for me about fly fishing is reading the water, finding what the fish is holding, seeing the fish. And so I spot and stalk trout. That's what I do. That's how I trout fish. And that's no different than when you're hunting. Somehow you have to see the elk. So you got to be where they are. And so stealthily, you're in the mountains, sit in the saddle, glassing, however you do it, and you're seeing your quarry, and it makes it so much easier. But some of my best days of trout fishing are just sitting on a boulder in perfect quietness, except the ripple of the river. And that's so therapeutic. And the fly fishermen that are listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And throughout my life, some of my best days, I didn't catch a fish.
Mhm.
Some of my best days, I didn't catch a fish. But there I was in that environment. And it's the same when I've been on mountaintop experiences hunting, and you work hard when you're big game hunt, for sheep
Yeah.
and mountain goats and moose and elk and all the rest. You're working very hard.
Mhm.
But there's times when a storm blows in and all of a sudden the sun comes out, and it's just I can't express it any different than it's an experience. It's a spiritual experience that you're seeing God's glory in the wilderness.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said it that way, because um, what's been another beautiful part of hunting and fly fishing both has been seeing my boys come up, and 4 boys learning how to do both, and being very good hunters and very good fly fishermen. All of them are. And I just love that. And one of my favorite stories, it's kind of a spiritual nature to it that was, I'll never forget this. This is the best story of all time for me. Was my son saying to me, he's now 16, he's been hunting since he was 12. Every year he shot a cow elk, and he doesn't want to go with me anymore. And then we get up there, we set up camp, we split wood, the fire's blazing, the guys are all around, and he goes, "Dad, I don't want to go on that. I don't want to go on that hill with you." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because all we ever see is cows." And I said, "Well, that's cool. I mean, you got more cows than most people get in a lifetime. You're only 16." He goes, "Yeah, but I'm on a bull." And I go, "Well, maybe you'll see a bull this year." And he goes, I don't like where we hunt. Can I try another area?" And I said, "Okay, sure, you're 16, that's cool." And he said, "What if I went south from you on that first mound, that first hill, and I'm just on the other side of that? I think that's a better place." And I said, "Okay." And then he gave his justification for it, because he was right in that a lot of the groupings of cows that had come through had come from that part of the woods coming through, and he wondered if maybe a bull might have been with them and somebody either already shot at it or got spooked and didn't want to go into this opening that we always hunted. So I understood. I said, yeah, that sounds good. So next morning we get up, snow's on the ground, probably 3 or 4 inches, and we're headed up the trail. We get there and we're going to split. We're going to split off. And he goes, so what did he, oh yeah, he said, hey Dad, I got one more thing that's on my heart. And I said, what? And he goes, I want to be the first shot. I said, what? He said, I want to be the first shot on the mountain. I said, you want to be the very first shot of the hunting season on this mountain? And he said, yeah. I said, son, there's probably like 200 hunters all over the flat tops here that we can hear their rifle report. You want to be the first one? He said, yeah, why can't I be the first one? Somebody's got to be the first one. And I said, okay. So we knelt down in the snow and I prayed. I said, Lord, I pray that my son Daniel would be the first shot on the mountain and that shot would be a bull. Amen. That was it. So then he takes off going his direction. I head up to mine. Now we got walkie-talkies because I wanted to be in walkie-talkie connection with him. So your first shot in Colorado in first rifle season, the first one you're going to hear is going to be somewhere between 6:45 a.m. and 7 a.m. I'll give you that's a 95% chance wherever you're hunting in Colorado for first rifle. If you're a place where you can hear a shot, that's when it's going to be because you don't have enough light before 6:45 and you barely got enough at 6:45. So it's 6:45 and it's 6:50 and it's 6:55 a.m. I hear this rifle shot off in the distance. And my other son, Isaac's with me, and he said, Dad, I mean, that sounds like maybe where Daniel was. And then I hear, oh, God, you hear that shot? Yeah, that was the first shot on the mountain. I said, yeah, was that you? He goes, oh, yeah, I got a 5x5. No way, man, that's awesome. And so then I hang up with him.
That's great.
And then I hear another shot. Okay, 5 minutes later, I hear another shot. Hey, Dad, I got a cow down too, because you could get 2 tags back then. What? You got a cow? He said, yeah, I got a cow and a bull down. They're like within 10 yards of each other. And I went, what? So then at that point, I'm getting out of my nest up on this hill where we always hunted to go check them out. It's only 5 after or 10 after 7. And then here comes 3 cows right through our valley. So boom, I knocked down the lead cow there. So I got that cow down. And then I cycle in another round, of course. I walk up to it, it's down. So we got three elk down in 15 minutes, right? So then I said to Isaac, I said, Isaac, why don't you go up and check on Danny? He's just on the other side up there. And I'm going to start opening up this one here. So I started to work on that one. It's probably 7:20. So it's probably been 10 minutes. I hear another shot go off. And Isaac shot a 5x5 about 30 yards from the other 5x5, which was about 10 yards from the cow. So
my goodness.
So we had four out, 2 bulls and 2 cows down in 25 minutes. It was crazy. That was one of my funnest stories.
Now, how many hours did it take to get all that meat back to camp?
It was all, I mean, we had all day. So we got everybody at that point. I mean, Isaac probably a little less because he's only 12. Daniel at 16, he knew how to quarter out an animal and everything. I think we probably got 2 fully done on the first day, and then the next day we got the other 2. And then we shared the meat. That was even too much for a family of 9. So we shared with other guys in the camp. As a matter of fact, I gave one of the whole 4 quarters and the back strap to another guy in the camp who didn't get anything. So I said, this is all yours. So he took it.
Amazing.
Isn't that amazing? I've never had that happen before or since.
So let's talk about this. At our church, at the road, we talk about peanut butter and jelly. PBJ, prayer, Bible, and journal. So you said a prayer. You didn't have a Bible with you at that time. Now, did you journal that so you could remember that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've often thought about saying more about it. There's not really that many situations where I'm talking about hunting and stuff, but that was a very, very special experience because of the prayer. That's the part. It's not that we got 4 elk. That I'm just sharing that because that is what happened. That was the result. But the part that was most special was that Daniel had a desire, and it obviously was a God ordained desire. And we prayed about it, and he saw God show up in such a mighty way. I've often wondered how maybe that experience might have molded him, because he's a very, very successful entrepreneurial, financial analyst now. And it'd be interesting to ask him if he felt like that was pivotal in any way in his life.
I would think, he had a sense, and I hunt. That's how I hunt, no matter where I am at, and that's how I fish. I I sense that the game's there, and I can remember I used to have a Springer Spaniel. Alex and I would go out, and we're hunting public land for pheasants, and all of a sudden I just look at this piece of cover, and I said, "Let's go." And we go in there, and Alex would do his thing and flush a bird, and I'd get the bird. People said, "Why did you go over there?" I said, "Just because that's where the bird was." And the same thing with hunting and with the fly fishing and stuff. That sometimes you get so attuned to what you're doing that you just allow the Holy Spirit to guide you. And this has nothing to do with church or religion. It has to do with my personal relationship with God, Holy Spirit, and Jesus. But I think that if hunters have intuition and they have senses about that, and what I would hope my listeners to do is acknowledge where that comes from. What's your
Right.
thought on that?
Right. Oh, totally, 100% agree. The more you're in nature, then the more you become nature. The Celtic Christianity of Scotland and Ireland used to talk about thin places. The term they used was thin places. And what they meant was there were these holy places out in the forest and in the hills and the mountains of Ireland and Scotland and the coast there, because it's an island area, where God was. And those were thin places between the 3-dimensional world and the 4th dimension, where angels came, where the Spirit of God came. Some believe that's how Mount Zion was, where Jerusalem is today, but where the temple was. And that these places where the Jews set up the tabernacle was a thin place. And when you read the Old Testament, it talks about the high places. And these would be those thin places that were close to God, that brought spirituality. And I think there's places like that in the hills and in the mountains where you don't know when you're in it until you're in it. And it's not like you're searching for it. It's more like it searches you out and it finds you. And when you're hunting, you kind of know. You begin to, I wouldn't say that we as hunters who hunted a lot have a sixth sense, like say a dog does. Dogs really have an amazing sixth sense. But I think we probably get a 5.8 sense. I mean, I think we get closer to that intuitive part of our heart that God put there, that loves wildness, loves being in the smells of the forest. That with experience, I don't think it happens immediately, but with experience, you start to kind of feel these thin places and feel the forest, and you just know where to go. You just sense where to go. And I think your most successful hunters are people like that, people who start to grow in how to. I think it was Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player, when he was explaining about what made him so good. And it wasn't, he said, I never go where the puck is, I go where the puck will go. So he was anticipating where the puck would go, not where it currently was. And I think hunting big game, I actually think hunting pheasant and quail and chucker is also very similar. I remember as a kid, probably 12 years old, I didn't have a dog yet. And so I was hunting by myself with this little 20 gauge shotgun. And I got so where I knew where the coveys were. And it wasn't just based on, okay, I found them there, but I could almost like feel where quail were. And I remember one time I went into this marshy area on one side of one of the lakes there, and I could hear them. I could hear the quail talking to themselves. I could hear them, the little tiny tweet. And I'm talking about very faint, extremely faint. When I've shared this story, most guys don't have any clue what I'm talking about. But I'd hunted so much, like every day, almost every day during hunting season. I just knew where they were. And I could see them. And then I got down on my hands and knees on this particular occasion. And then suddenly the floor of the forest came alive. And I could see 15, 20 quail in this covey moving. Never had seen that before. They did not even know I was there. And I was right on. They were like almost all around me. And then I stood up, and I flushed them. But I think that's how the Native Americans hunted. The Native Americans probably had a sixth sense about them because they were in nature so much.
I agree. And John Eldridge wrote a book, Wild at Heart, and that's about masculinity and man, but it's also about the challenges that are reserved for men. And that's one thing that through this show, Hutch on Hunting podcast, I want men to understand how special they are, how critical to their families they are, and how through hunting they can become a stronger man. Because we talked about at the top of the show, just the elements that you're put in that you have to endure. And
Yeah,
I don't endure it, I enjoy it, which is
right,
which is kind of crazy because up in Canada, I set 4 days before I shot my buck, 32 degrees below zero in hay bales. And that doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but it makes perfect sense to me because one, I'm in nature. Two, I'm by myself. It's dead silence. And you're just there from 7 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
right.
And it's just like you said, all of a sudden you're at camp and you enjoyed sitting by the fire, meditating, reading, praying, whatever. And that can be the highlight of the trip because there's something that I've found in my travels that when you're sitting around a campfire talking with men or boys or women, there's brotherhood, which we have at the road. You have a brotherhood that brings you all together on common ground. And so much today, we miss that common ground because there's way too much noise out there. But when you go in a hunting camp, a fishing camp, or just with another guy or your kids or something on a trout stream, it's just you. I typically turn my phone off, and there you are. And it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. Absolutely. And there's no doubt about the fact that you don't really know what we're talking about unless you get out there and do it. And so for all your listeners that maybe have never done big game hunting, I would encourage you, go with someone who knows the lay of the land, knows where to hunt, and who you really like being around, and try it. And I think one of the best ways to see if you'd like to get into big game hunting is to just take hikes. Like anytime during the year, go on a trail, get up and hike. And if you find the beauty of that invigorating, if you find the beauty of that encouraging to your spirit and your heart, you probably would like big game hunting.
Share with us about the wonderful bull you shot up in, I believe it was 62, right?
Yeah,
Leonard
Unit
there,
62.
62. Tell us
Yeah.
that story.
Yeah, so I had 17 preference points, which for you that don't know what those are in Colorado, you put in for a preference point by making that your first choice on the draw. And you have a code that you use. So for 17 years, my first choice in elk hunting was to get just a point. And what you're trying to do is build up points that then give you the freedom to cash in your points to go into a more big game trophy area. So Unit 62 was modest. I would say 17 preference points would be modest as far as the big trophy areas. Unit 1, Unit 2 are going to be more like 24, 25 points. And I wasn't getting any younger, so I thought, okay, what's the quickest way to get in there? And either it was bow hunting or muzzle loading. I chose muzzle loading. And so in 2017, I decided if I can find somebody who could help me, maybe even guide me, then I wanted to try to do this with Unit 62. So I just started calling outfitters. I just looked up outfitters on the internet and I put in Unit 62 and I found maybe 10 guys that guided sometimes in Unit 62, and I just started calling and getting their pricing and all that. Anyway, this one guy called. He said, "Yeah, I'm not doing it anymore. I wish I could help you, but I can't." And I was like, "Oh, bummer." And then he goes, and then I said, "Well, why aren't you doing it anymore?" And he said, "Well, I'm a Christian, and I have this ministry that I do and with gangs and stuff in San Diego. And so I wanted to give more time to working with these gangs in San Diego." I said, "Well, that's cool. I'm a pastor." And we hit it off at that point about our faith, and we just had so much in common. And then I just had this crazy idea. I said, "Look, I would rather pay you to guide me on a hunt because of who you are. I'd rather pay you to do it. Why don't you come out just for me and guide me, and I'll bless you, man. I'll bless you financially. So I'm not going to take your money." But it's funny you say that because the week before that time frame that you want to go, I'm actually going to be out there, and I have a house in Uray. So we worked it out. I did all the shopping. I set up the camp and everything with him and his son, but his son didn't hunt with us any, but he helped us get it out. So I had never muzzle loaded before, so I learned how to. I borrowed his rifle, as a matter of fact. I drove all the way to Uray, picked up his rifle, drove back to Colorado Springs, and just started practicing how to shoot a muzzleloader for about say 2 months before the season, and I had it pretty dialed in. So we get up there, and First day, nothing. Second day, nothing. Third day, I got a shot at about 150 yards, pretty far for a muzzleloader, and I missed it. And fourth day, nothing. Then fifth day, he calls in this big bull. All I can tell you is it was big, okay? And this, it's a bull and a cow together, which is like the worst combination. Because if that cow gets spooked, boom, we're done. But I set up, he calls, here comes at 75 yards this big bull, and he's facing down the hill. It's a perfect broadside shot. Bam. I hit it. Well, let me just say this. Okay, that's not exactly true. So I set up the sticks. I got down on the ground with my sticks. He's behind me, of course. And I aim and clip. Nothing fires. I got a perfect shot at 75 yards. Iron sights, right? And so I clip and I look down. What? I mean, did the powder get wet or something? I didn't know what to do. And then I realized I had not rotated the pin far enough back. So then I rotated back, and the elk's still standing there, looks away, boom, I hit it behind the shoulder. He's looking right at me, and then here comes this cow. This cow comes ripping through the woods, headed straight for me. And so I just stayed perfectly quiet, did not move an inch. It ran right past, it probably ran within 5 feet of me, never even saw me. Just ran right past me. Well, the bull didn't care. It didn't notice that. Finally, the bull is looking right at me, looks away, and now it's down on its knees, okay? So in that 45 seconds, I reload. So I start reloading while the bull's not looking, really quietly reloading to set up on the sticks again. Her head, I mean, his head is just up. He doesn't look like anything's bothering him at all. I know I've made a perfect shot. So he starts to stand up like he's going to take off. And then bam, I hit him again, same spot. He goes down again. Again, he's looking around, head up. Seems to be like no problem at all, just resting, looks away, reload. Got about 45 seconds, I'll reload, I set up again on the stick, I'm aiming, he gets up again, Bruce. So he stands up again, and all I'm thinking, is he's gonna bolt out of here, and we're never gonna find him, even with 2 rounds in him. But I'm betting on the fact that none of the rounds have an exit wound. There's been no exit of the rounds. And so he's bleeding internally, which you can't track that. You can't track internally bleeding animal. And it's in the fall, it's in September. So there's no snow. It's history, man. So I said, okay, I'm burying another one in. So boom, I hit it again, 3rd time. And this time he goes down, and then the head, starts to drop, and he expired. And for all you guys that haven't hunted a lot, my rule of thumb is always wait at least 30 minutes, minimum of 30 minutes before I approach an animal. Even if I can just see it laying there, I'll put a clock on, I'll put it on my stopwatch, I'll wait 30 minutes, because there's so many stories of people walking up, like I easily could have blown that on 3 different occasions. If I started to reload or I made a move and he saw me on the 1st, 2nd, or even 3rd shot, he would have bolted. He would have taken off. But anyway, he was a 325.5 Boone and Crockett bull, and he's on my wall now. And praise God, we got him out on horseback. Took a whole day to get him out, but that was a great experience. Really great experience.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous bull, folks. But that's one thing in Colorado, and I'm just going to put this in. We reintroduced wolves that started in January. So if you have any points at all in Colorado, start burning them, because it's possible, just possible, this is one guy's opinion, that in 10 years, the wolves will be up to 100 wolves or so. And in the White River National Forest, there will be fewer elk. Now, right now, we've got about over 200,000 elk in Colorado. And the flat tops where Steve likes to hunt, there's about 24,000. And it's a lot of land. But if you're listening to this, March 1st comes up, start burning your points. And like Steve said, to get into Unit 2 now, I think it takes 25 years. Unit 2 has had wolves for 3 or 4 years. I have a friend that's a rancher up there. They've had wolves in there. They just came down from Wyoming. So they've been there. But Colorado is in a battle. And one thing you can do is go savethehuntcolorado.com and get involved, get educated on the North American model of wildlife conservation, because there's people, radical anti-hunting people, that want to shut down hunting in Colorado. The bill coming up in November, Proposition 91, is about banning mountain lions, bobcats, and lynx. Right now, lynx, you can't hunt lynx. You can't kill lynx. You can't trap lynx because they're protected, federally protected. But they're throwing that into their bill anyway. So mountain lions and bobcats, no hunting. Well, Dan Gates is spearheading Save the Hunt Colorado, and he read me excerpts from the bill. And all you have to do is put elk, mule deer, antelope instead of mountain lion, bobcat, lynx in future bills. Same wording. They're just changing the species. That's how it's set up. It's a Trojan horse, folks. So Save the Hunt Colorado, please get involved, educate yourself. So it's not an emotional decision. Well, they shouldn't hunt mountain lions. Well, have a better argument than that. So that's my shout out for Save the Hunt Colorado. Steve, any last thoughts about hunting?
No, I would just say that it's a great way to raise a family, boys or girls, is to take up hunting. And it doesn't have to be big game. It can be pheasant, it could be rabbit, it could be squirrels. But get out in the outdoors, get your vitamin D, be out there, experience the outdoors. And I think hunting is one of the best ways to do that. And fly fishing too, I think is one of the best ways to do that.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Again, Steve Holt, Pastor Steve Holt, thank you so much for being a guest on Hutch on Hunting.